I was listening to the radio the other day about the Ukrainian situation, and this was on Democracy Now, and they managed to interview a man who was in one of the cities. I can't recall. They weren't quite being bombed yet. The city adjacent to them was being bombed, but supplies were low, and a lot of people had fled. And this man, he was formerly an IT professional, but now he was just doing whatever. He was trying. He would wake up every morning and call everyone he knew to see how they were. He would go about getting food for himself and his family. He would also get food for other people's pets whom they had perhaps had to leave there, if there was food available. And he assisted with, preparations in case of invasion, things like changing road signs in order to confuse the Russian soldiers, and setting up roadblocks and things like this. In other words, he was kind of just doing this and that in this, very, very grave situation. He was just taking care of things. I was very pleased to hear that he was, among other things, taking care of the animals also. I think in these desperate situations, it's so easy to simply prioritize your own species, and your own people. And so I was, my heart was warmed to hear that. I'd like to talk a little bit about our relationship to other sentient beings. Of course, in Buddhism, we always say all sentient beings. But in practice, we tend to focus on ourselves more than that, and perhaps the non-human companion animals that we have. But I'm afraid that when human affairs become very, very desperate, oftentimes we forget the non-human creatures that we share this life with, and that we also depend upon for our very existence. So one of the things that some time ago, when Reverend Marvin Harada, no, it wasn't him, it was the other gentleman who was at the EVL, and I can't recall his name, but he concentrated on the aspect of Amida, which is Amitayus, which means immeasurable life. And he had some illustrations, to sort of show how, our lives are a small part of like a great life, a larger life. And I like this very much because I think that it's a very fundamental part of Buddhism to talk about interconnectedness, the interconnectedness of all beings. This is a very fundamental teaching of Buddhism, and it goes back to the very beginnings of Siddhartha Gautama's teaching. Later, as it developed in the Mahayana, it became, there was a development connected with a very large sutra called the Flower Ornament. And the Flower Ornament Sutra extends the idea of interdependency to the point of like including interpenetration. So not only are we dependent upon other beings, we are interpenetrated with other beings. And I think an aspect of this that is very interesting to consider is within our very bodies, there are many, many other beings. There are mitochondria, which inhabit all of our cells. Mitochondria do not share our DNA. They are other beings, like in millions of years ago, they took up residence and they became very, very, very valuable to the host cells. And so they became, and then they altered to the point where they shared their dependency with us, so that our cells shelter them and they provide the energy that enables our cells to function. Quite literally, if we lost our mitochondria suddenly, somehow, we would simply fall apart. We would not, exist anymore. Another aspect of other beings that live within us and enable us to live, that has come to much greater attention these days are the microbiomes, which are communities of microbes which enable certain functions to happen. We tend to primarily think of them in terms of digestion, but I think that there's other things too. So these are, once again, other beings that without which we would really not be able to survive, or at least not to survive very, very, very well. When I was young, I was very sickly, and I lived in Florida, and down south at that time, back in the 50s, they would use penicillin for anything you had down there. They would give you penicillin. Of course, they didn't realize that every time you give someone penicillin, it's as if you're dropping a nuclear bomb on the microbiome. And so later I learned that probably one of the reasons that I was very sickly is because they kept giving me penicillin. And they weren't allowing, and they simply had no idea that you actually needed to restore the microbes in the gastrointestinal tract in order to have health. My father died when I was 9, and we moved back up to New Jersey, which is where I came from. And then my health improved because they didn't do that there. They were much more careful about using antibiotics. So anyway, so that was a vivid example, a lived example where I know that my life was much poorer, or for the sorry state of the microbiome. There's another aspect which is kind of interesting too. There are viruses. I mean, we tend to think of viruses as all being rather bad and making you sick, but actually the majority of viruses have harmonious relationships with us, and and some of them are actually what are called bacteriophages, and they will actually attack harmful bacteria and eat it. These are beginning to be used more and more in treating bacterial infections which are resistant to antibiotics. Because we overused antibiotics and we used them in industrial agriculture to take care of the animals, because the animals are in such awful situations that they need antibiotics constantly. So anyway, so because we are oftentimes ingesting kind of deteriorated antibiotics through runoffs into the water and everything like that, and because of the extreme use of antisepsis in hospitals, we are beginning to encounter extremely resistant bacteria, extremely, so that the antibiotics are not working. So they're beginning to turn to these viruses. viruses are much more capable, being living entities of dealing with these things. So that's a kind of a new development. Some of you may at some point or another actually encounter this kind of treatment. Anyway, so I guess all of this, is, I would say that it gives a certain another twist to a sense in which the ego, which is also an old Buddhist teaching, is not an actual entity, because not only are we ourselves composed of many different things, but we are actually dependent for our very selves upon things which are not us. So that, to be ourselves is to some degree to be ourselves, but it also is to be someone else, actually many others. So anyway, so I think that one of the things that, is, I think the world is reaching a point where the strategy of basically exploiting and treating non-human beings as just something that we either simply just get rid of or exploit for our own benefits is beginning fairly clearly to become completely dysfunctional. We really will not survive if we continue this way. And so I think that the ideals of, taking care of all sentient beings are beginning to become simply a means of continuing to survive. It's sort of like it's sort of almost so that one must affirm the bodhisattva ideal simply as a means of surviving. So the 22nd vow of in the larger sutra of immeasurable life is one that Shinran listed as one of the most important and central vows, along with the 18th and the 19th and the 20th and the 17th and the 11th and probably a couple of others I can't think of. So I wanted to, I wanted to read this vow, particularly the second part of it. So when I attain Buddhahood, the bodhisattvas of other Buddha lands who come and are born in my land will ultimately and unfailingly attain succession to the position of Buddhahood in one lifetime, except for those who, in accordance with their own original vows, freely to guide others to enlightenment, don the armor of universal vows for the sake of sentient beings, accumulate roots of virtue, emancipate all beings, travel to Buddha lands to perform bodhisattva practices, and make offerings to all Buddhas and Tathagatas throughout the 10 quarters, awaken sentient beings, countless as the sands of the Ganges, and bring them to abide firmly in the unexcelled, right, true way. Such bodhisattvas surpass ordinary ones, manifest the practices of all bodhisattva stages, and discipline themselves in the virtue of Samantabhadra. Should it not be so, may I not attain perfect enlightenment. So Samantabhadra, therefore, is his name means, I believe, universal worthy or universal benefit. And he is along with Avalokiteshvara, better known in Japan as Kanzeon or Kannon, And Daiseishi, his name in Japanese is Fugen Bosatsu. In the Pure Land tradition, there are actually there's a piece of work that came out of the Flower Ornament Sutra, which is important in the Chinese Pure Land tradition. It hasn't been carried over, as far as I know, so much in the Japanese Pure Land tradition, but it's called the 10 Vows of Samantabhadra. And I'm not going to go into all 10 vows, but I wanted to read, and this will be my final thing, the 9th vow, which I think is, which is in terms of what I've been speaking of, I find to be a very inspiring piece of work. So the 9th vow is concerned with according with all beings. Sudana, to accommodate and benefit all living beings is explained like this. Throughout the oceans of worlds in the 10 directions, exhausting the Dharma realm and the realms of empty space, there are many different kinds of living beings. That is to say, there are those born from eggs, the womb-born, the transformationally born, as well as those who live and rely on earth, water, fire, and air for their existence. There are beings dwelling in space and those who are born in and live in plants and trees. This includes all the many species and races with their diverse bodies, shapes, appearances, lifespans, families, names, and natures. This includes their many varieties of knowledge and views, their various desires and pleasures, their thoughts and deeds, and their many different behaviors, clothing, and diet. It includes beings who dwell in different villages, towns, cities, and palaces, as well as gods, dragons, and others of the 8 divisions, humans and non-humans alike. Also, there are footless beings, beings with 2 feet, 4 feet, and many feet, with form and without form, with thought and without thought, and not entirely with thought, and not entirely without thought. I will accord with and take care of all of these many kinds of beings, providing all manner of services and offerings for them. I will treat them with the same respect I show my own parents, teachers, elders, arhats, and even the Buddhas. I will serve them all equally without difference. I will be a good physician to the sick and suffering. I will lead those who have lost their way to the right road. I will be a bright light for those in the dark night and cause the poor and destitute to uncover hidden treasures. The Bodhisattva impartially benefits all living beings in this manner. Why is this? If a Bodhisattva accords with living beings, then he accords with and makes offerings to all Buddhas. If he can honor and serve living beings, then he honors and serves the Buddhas. If he makes living beings happy, he is making all Buddhas happy. Why is this? It is because all Buddhas take the mind of great compassion as their substance. Because of living beings, they develop great compassion. From great compassion, the Bodhi mind is born. And because of the Bodhi mind, they accomplish supreme, perfect enlightenment. It is like a great regal tree growing in the rocks and sand of barren wilderness. When the roots get water, the branches, leaves, flowers, and fruits will all flourish. The regal Bodhi tree growing in the wilderness of birth and death is the same. All living beings are its roots. All Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are its flowers and fruits. By benefiting all beings with the water of great compassion, one can realize the flowers and fruits of the Bodhisattvas and Buddha's wisdom. Why is this? It is because by benefiting living beings with the water of great compassion, the Bodhisattvas can attain supreme perfect enlightenment. Therefore, Bodhi belongs to living beings. Without living beings, no Bodhisattva could achieve supreme perfect enlightenment. Good man, you should understand these principles in this way. When the mind is impartial toward all living beings, one can accomplish full and perfect great compassion. By using the mind of great compassion to accord with living beings, one perfects the offerings of the Dharma to the Buddha. In this way, the Bodhisattva constantly accords with living beings. Okay, so I think that's all I have for now. So once again, as always, I thank you for your patience.